He said goodbye to his dying wife and walked out of the hospital believing it was the last time he'd see her alive. But seconds later, he overheard two nurses discussing a secret transfer that was never supposed to happen. What started as a heartbreaking farewell soon uncovered a shocking conspiracy involving altered medical records, millions in fraud, and a powerful woman willing to destroy anyone who stood in her way. Subscribe now and stay until the end to discover how one overheard conversation exposed the truth and saved a life. I am Bertad, and the night I thought I was losing my wife forever became the night everything started to unravel. For most of my life, I trusted experts. I believed doctors when they gave diagnoses. I believed records when they showed results. I believed institutions existed to protect people. That belief would soon be destroyed. 3 weeks before everything changed, my wife, Lissa, was admitted to St. Aldrich Medical Center after experiencing a series of frightening neurological episodes. It started with headaches, memory lapses, and sudden moments of confusion. At first, we thought stress was the cause. Then the symptoms became impossible to ignore. The hospital immediately began testing. 1 day passed. Then another. Then another. Every new specialist seemed more concerned than the last. At first they spoke cautiously. Then they started speaking in probabilities. Finally, they spoke in conclusions. The prognosis was devastating. According to the doctors, Lissa was suffering from a rapidly progressing neurological condition that was unlikely to respond to treatment. I remember sitting across from the lead physician in a consultation room. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. The doctor folded his hands on the desk and avoided direct eye contact for several seconds before speaking. We believe we've reached the point where recovery is no longer a realistic expectation. The words hit me harder than I expected. I stared at him. What does that mean exactly? He took a slow breath. It means we're shifting our focus toward comfort rather than recovery. I knew exactly what he meant. He was telling me my wife was dying. The drive home that night felt endless. Neither of us spoke much. Lissa sat quietly in the passenger seat staring out the window. Streetlights passed across her face one after another. Eventually she looked at me. "Are you angry?" she asked. The question surprised me. Why would I be angry? She gave a weak smile. "Because I might leave you alone." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Don't say that. I'm serious. You aren't leaving." The confidence in my voice was fake. She knew it. I knew it. But neither of us wanted to admit it. Over the following days, her condition appeared to worsen. She became weaker, more exhausted, less responsive. Sometimes she struggled to stay awake during conversations. Other times she seemed distant, as if she were fighting through a fog nobody else could see. Every visit to the hospital felt heavier than the one before. Friends stopped asking for updates because the news never improved. Family members began preparing themselves for the worst. Even I started accepting the possibility that our time together was running out. Then came the final day. Or at least what I believed was the final day. Rain fell steadily outside the hospital that evening. The sky had turned dark long before sunset. The weather matched the mood inside room 814. Machines monitored Lissa's condition. A heart monitor beeped quietly beside the bed. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale air conditioning. I sat beside her for hours. Neither of us said much. At some point she opened her eyes and looked at me. They seemed tired. Far more tired than I had ever seen. I took her hand. "I love you." Her fingers moved slightly around mine. "I know," she whispered. For several moments neither of us spoke. I wanted to remember everything. The way she looked. The sound of her voice. The warmth of her hand. Every detail suddenly felt important. As if I might need those memories later. Around 9 o'clock, a nurse entered the room. She checked several monitors and adjusted medication levels. Shortly afterward, the attending physician arrived. He reviewed Lysera's chart and then turned toward me. Mr. Vuro, you've been here almost continuously for weeks. I nodded. You should get some rest. I looked at Lysera. I don't want to leave. I understand, he said gently. But there isn't anything more you can do tonight. His tone suggested something final. Something unspoken. As if everyone in the room already knew what was coming. Everyone except me. Eventually, I stood. My legs felt stiff from sitting so long. I leaned forward and kissed Lysera's forehead. Her eyes remained closed. I'll be back in the morning. She gave the slightest nod. Then I walked toward the door. Every step felt wrong. Part of me wanted to stay. Part of me feared what might happen if I left. But exhaustion won. I exited room 814 and entered the hallway. The corridor was unusually quiet. Only a handful of staff members moved between stations. Most visitors had already gone home. I walked slowly toward the elevators. The sound of rain echoed faintly against distant windows. For a moment, everything felt numb. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I felt empty. Then something happened. Something so small that most people would have ignored it. As I approached a vending machine near an intersection of hallways, I heard two nurses talking. Their voices were low, casual, the kind of conversation people have when they think nobody important is listening. I wasn't paying attention at first. I simply continued walking. Then one sentence stopped me instantly. Room 814 shouldn't even be here anymore. I froze. My heart skipped. Room 814. My wife's room. I slowly turned my head toward the voices. The nurses stood near a supply station several yards away. Neither noticed me. The second nurse looked nervous. I thought the transfer was scheduled for tonight. The first nurse glanced around before answering. So did I. Transfer. What transfer? The moment I heard those words, every trace of exhaustion vanished. I remained motionless near the vending machine, careful not to attract attention. The nurses continued speaking. Their voices were low, but the hallway was so quiet that fragments of the conversation carried clearly through the air. The nervous nurse crossed her arms. I don't understand why they're delaying it. The other nurse shook her head. Because Drusilla wants the family completely convinced first. My stomach tightened. Convinced of what? The nervous nurse glanced toward the corridor leading to the patient rooms. What if someone finds out? They won't. The response came immediately. They never do. A chill ran through me. The conversation didn't sound like medical staff discussing patient care. It sounded like people discussing a plan. Before I could hear more, a supervisor appeared from around the corner. The nurses instantly stopped talking. Their expressions changed. Professional. Controlled. Within seconds they walked away in opposite directions. The conversation was over. I stood there for several moments. My mind raced. Part of me wanted to dismiss what I had heard. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe room 814 referred to something else. Maybe I was simply exhausted and interpreting ordinary comments as something suspicious. But another part of me couldn't ignore the details. Transfer. Family convinced. Drusilla. They never do. None of it felt normal. Eventually, I left the hospital. The rain had intensified. Water streamed across the parking lot beneath the yellow glow of overhead lights. I climbed into my car and sat there without starting the engine. The windshield filled with raindrops. For several minutes, I simply stared ahead, trying to make sense of what I had heard, trying to convince myself it meant nothing. I failed. The drive home felt different from every previous trip. Instead of grief, I felt uncertainty. Questions replaced despair. By the time I reached my house shortly before midnight, I wasn't thinking about sleep. I was thinking about answers. I entered through the front door. The house was silent. Normally Lysera's presence filled every room. Even when she wasn't speaking, there was always evidence she had been there. A book left open. A coffee mug on the kitchen counter. A blanket folded neatly on the sofa. Now everything felt frozen. Untouched. Waiting. I walked into my home office and opened my laptop. The patient portal from St. Aldrich Medical Center contained copies of medical reports, laboratory results, imaging summaries, and treatment notes. Over the previous weeks, I had reviewed them constantly. Not because I understood medicine. Because reading them made me feel involved. Like I was helping somehow. Tonight, I opened the portal with a different purpose. I wasn't looking for hope. I was looking for inconsistencies. At first, everything appeared normal. Lab reports. Medication updates. Physician notes. Then I noticed something strange. One neurological assessment was missing. I blinked. That couldn't be right. I remembered reading it 2 days earlier. The report had been uploaded after a specialist consultation. Now it was gone. I searched again. Nothing. My heartbeat quickened. I opened another section. Then another. A second document had disappeared. This time I was certain. I had downloaded a copy previously. I searched my computer. A few seconds later I found it. The file opened immediately. I compared it to the current records. My breathing slowed. Then stopped. The report on my computer and the report inside the hospital system were different. Not slightly different. Completely different. Several conclusions had been changed. Entire sections had been removed. A recommendation for additional testing had vanished. A paragraph expressing uncertainty about the diagnosis was gone. Someone had edited the record. I stared at the screen. There had to be a mistake. A clerical error. A software problem. Anything else. But deep down I already knew what I was looking at. The records had been altered. The question was why. I spent the next 2 hours reviewing every file I could access. The more I checked, the worse it became. Dates didn't match. Notes appeared rewritten. Medical opinions seemed strangely consistent. Too consistent. As if multiple specialists had somehow reached identical conclusions using identical wording. By 3 o'clock in the morning, I had filled an entire notebook with observations. Yet none of it explained the nurse's conversation. I finally forced myself to sleep. Unfortunately, sleep lasted less than 3 hours. By sunrise, I was already back in the car heading toward the hospital. The administration office opened at 8. I arrived at 7:45. The waiting area remained mostly empty. A receptionist greeted me politely. I requested a meeting with Patient Records Administration. 30 minutes later, I sat across from a middle-aged administrator named Marcus Enley. He listened patiently while I explained the discrepancies. When I finished, he folded his hands. Mr. Vuro, electronic records are updated regularly. These weren't updates. They may have been corrections. Then where are the original versions? His expression tightened slightly. I don't have that information. I leaned forward. Someone changed my wife's medical reports. We have strict protocols. Then show me the audit logs. His eyes narrowed. I'm not authorized to release those. The meeting ended soon afterward. I left with fewer answers than before. As I stepped outside into the main hospital courtyard, frustration boiled inside me. For the first time since Lysera had been admitted, I felt something stronger than sadness. I felt suspicion. And suspicion quickly became determination. Someone was hiding something. I simply didn't know who. A few hours later, while sitting alone in the hospital cafeteria, my phone vibrated. The number was unfamiliar. I almost ignored it. Almost. Instead, I answered. Hello. For a moment there was only silence. Then a man's voice spoke quietly. Is this Bertad Vuro? Yes. My name is Dr. Haven Roque. The name meant nothing to me. I reviewed your wife's original neurological scans. Every muscle in my body tensed. What about them? A brief pause followed, long enough to make me nervous. Then he said something that changed everything. For several seconds after the call ended, I stood frozen in the hallway. Patients walked past. Nurses pushed carts between departments. Announcements echoed from overhead speakers. Yet none of it felt real. Only one sentence remained in my head. Your wife isn't the only patient whose records concern me. I looked at my phone screen. The call had lasted less than 5 minutes. 5 minutes had shattered everything I thought I knew. I immediately called the number back. No answer. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. The frustration was unbearable. I finally sent a text. Who are you really? How do I know you're telling the truth? No response came. The rest of the afternoon passed slowly. I visited Lysera's room twice. She appeared heavily sedated. More than usual. Each time I entered, she seemed barely aware of her surroundings. Her eyes opened occasionally. She recognized me. Then she drifted away again. The doctors claimed her condition was progressing. But now every explanation sounded suspicious. Every answer felt rehearsed. Every reassurance felt manufactured. By evening, I made a decision. If Dr. Haven Roque truly knew something, I needed to meet him face to face. At 7:30 that night my phone vibrated. A message appeared. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Rensford Cafe. Come alone. No signature. No explanation. Just an address. The next morning, I arrived 20 minutes early. Rensford Cafe sat 3 blocks away from the hospital. The place was small and quiet. Most customers appeared to be office workers grabbing coffee before work. I chose a table near the back. 10 o'clock arrived. Then 10:03. Then 10:05. I began wondering whether the meeting was a mistake. Then a man entered. Mid-40s. Dark coat. Tired eyes. He scanned the room once before walking directly toward me. Bertad Vuro? I nodded. Dr. Haven Roque. He sat without shaking my hand. Without ordering coffee. Without making small talk. His expression suggested someone carrying a burden he no longer wanted. I leaned forward immediately. My wife's scans. He nodded. They were reviewed by multiple specialists. Then why are you saying the diagnosis doesn't fit? His answer came instantly. Because I read the original imaging. And the abnormalities exist. My stomach tightened. But they don't indicate terminal progression. I stared at him. Then why would everyone say she is dying? He looked around the cafe before answering, as though making sure nobody nearby was listening. Because the scans aren't the important part. That statement confused me completely. What does that mean? It means your wife wasn't targeted because of her illness. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The words made no sense. Targeted? What are you talking about? Haven exhaled slowly. Then he revealed the first piece of a puzzle I never knew existed. Before she became a patient, your wife was conducting an audit. I blinked. An audit? What audit? You didn't know? No. His expression darkened. Then she never told you. The statement surprised me. Lysera and I shared almost everything. Or so I thought. Haven reached into his coat pocket. He removed a folded document. Then he slid it across the table. I unfolded it carefully. At the top appeared a company name. Karain Healthcare Investments. Below it sat dozens of financial entries. Transfers. Payments. Account numbers. The paperwork looked complicated. But one thing immediately caught my attention. Lysera's name appeared in the corner. Reviewer, Lysera Vuro. I looked up. What is this? A preliminary audit. My pulse accelerated. Why was she investigating them? Because an insurance consortium hired independent analysts to examine suspicious billing activity. The name Karain immediately triggered a memory. Drusilla. The name the nurses had mentioned. I felt my chest tighten. Drusilla Karain? Haven nodded. Yes. The realization hit hard. For the first time, the names connected. The nurses. The missing records. The altered reports. The mysterious phone call. Everything pointed toward the same person. I looked down at the document again. What exactly did Lysera find? Haven's expression became even more serious. Millions of dollars in questionable claims. I stared at him. Questionable how? Patients listed as receiving treatment they never received. I frowned. Insurance fraud? Worse. He leaned closer. Entire rehabilitation programs that existed mostly on paper. The cafe suddenly felt quieter, as though every sound around us had faded away. How much money are we talking about? At least $40 million. I nearly dropped the document. 40 million. The number was staggering. And Lysera found this? Part of it. My thoughts raced. If what Haven was saying was true, then Lysera had unknowingly stepped into a criminal operation worth millions. That alone would be dangerous. But another question immediately followed. What does that have to do with her illness? Haven remained silent for several seconds, long enough to make me uncomfortable. Finally he spoke. That's the part one can't fully prove. My frustration returned instantly. You called me because you had answers. I called because I have concerns. That's not the same thing. I know. He rubbed his forehead. The gesture revealed how exhausted he truly looked. I believe your wife's condition was exploited. The wording caught my attention. Exploited. Not caused. Not fabricated. Exploited. I leaned forward. Explain. Haven lowered his voice. Your wife genuinely became ill. I swallowed. Then the diagnosis wasn't completely fake. No. He shook his head. The condition exists. A strange mixture of relief and fear washed through me. At least part of the medical story was real. But Haven wasn't finished. The problem is what happened afterward. My heartbeat quickened again. What happened afterward? Her treatment changed. I stared at him. Changed how? Excessive sedation. The answer came immediately. So quickly that it sounded rehearsed. As if he had been waiting weeks to say it. I thought about Lysera's behavior. The exhaustion. The confusion. The constant sleepiness. The inability to stay alert. At the time it had seemed like evidence of worsening illness. Now it looked different. Dangerously different. You're saying someone intentionally kept her sedated? The drive back to St. Aldrich Medical Center felt completely different from every previous visit. Until now, I had been searching for medical answers. Now I was searching for evidence. The distinction mattered. If Haven was right, then someone inside the system had been manipulating information for reasons that had nothing to do with patient care. And if that was true, every minute mattered. I arrived at the hospital shortly after noon. Before going to Lysera's room, I stopped by the records department. The same receptionist sat behind the desk. The same polite smile. The same carefully controlled professionalism. This time I didn't ask questions. I simply observed. People entered. People left. Employees moved between offices carrying folders and tablets. Nothing looked suspicious. Yet somewhere inside this building, Records had been altered. Someone had done it. Someone knew exactly what was happening. The challenge was figuring out who. I eventually made my way to room 814. When I entered, Lysera appeared asleep. The curtains were partially open. Sunlight spilled across the floor. For several moments I simply watched her. Then something unexpected happened. Her eyes opened. Not slowly. Not weakly. Immediately. Alertly. I froze. For the first time in weeks, she looked more awake than usual. Bertad. Her voice sounded hoarse. But clearer. Much clearer. I moved beside the bed. Lysera. She looked around the room. Then toward the hallway. Then back at me. The behavior seemed strange. Almost cautious. Is anyone with you? The question surprised me. No. She relaxed slightly. Then she reached for my hand. Her fingers trembled. Bertad. What is it? For several seconds she struggled to speak, as though choosing her words carefully. Finally she whispered. They took it. A chill ran through me. What did they take? My files. The words hit me instantly. Haven had mentioned missing documents. Now Lysera was saying the same thing. When? She closed her eyes briefly, trying to remember. A few days before I came here. What files? The audit. My pulse accelerated. The audit was real. Everything Haven told me was real. I glanced toward the doorway instinctively, then looked back at her. Who took them? She shook her head weakly. I don't know. What do you remember? Her breathing became heavier. The laptop. She paused. Someone accessed it. How do you know? I received login alerts. Another piece fell into place. The missing documents. The deleted records. The altered reports. Nothing about this situation was accidental. Before I could ask another question, the door opened. A nurse entered. Instantly Lysera stopped talking. The change was immediate. Her expression became distant. Passive. Silent. The nurse smiled politely. How are we feeling today? I watched carefully. Lysera didn't answer. The nurse checked medication levels and made notes on a tablet. Then she left. The moment the door closed, Lysera grabbed my wrist. Her strength surprised me. They're watching. I stared at her. Who? She shook her head. I don't know. The answer frustrated me. But the fear in her eyes was genuine. Very genuine. And that frightened me more than anything else. That evening I returned home and reviewed everything I had collected. Notes. Screenshots. Copies of reports. Names. Dates. Timelines. The dining table disappeared beneath stacks of documents. Around midnight, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. Again. I answered immediately. Hello. A woman's voice responded. Quiet. Careful. I need to meet you. I sat upright. Who is this? I work at St. Aldrich. My heart accelerated. What department? I can't discuss this on the phone. Then why call me? A brief silence followed. Then she answered. Because your wife isn't the only victim. The statement sent a wave of cold through my body. Victim. Not patient. Victim. When can we meet? Tomorrow. Where? Central Station. I frowned. A train station? Lots of people. The reasoning made sense. Before ending the call, she added one final sentence. Come alone. Then the line disconnected. The next morning I arrived at Central Station 20 minutes early. The terminal was crowded. Travelers moved in every direction. Announcements echoed overhead. The constant movement made surveillance difficult. Exactly the kind of place someone would choose for a secret meeting. At 9:15 a.m., a woman approached. Early 30s. Brown coat. Dark hair. Nervous expression. She stopped beside my table. "Mr. Bureau?" I nodded. She sat down immediately. "My name is Vena Solis." "You're from the hospital?" "Digital records." My pulse quickened. This was the first person directly connected to the record system. The first person who might know what happened. Vena looked around repeatedly while speaking. Her anxiety was obvious. "You need to listen carefully." "I'm listening." She reached into her bag. Then she removed a small flash drive. My eyes locked onto it immediately. "What is that?" "The reason I contacted you." She slid it across the table. I picked it up. It felt ordinary, tiny, lightweight. Yet Vena looked at it as if it contained something dangerous. "What does it have on it?" Her answer changed everything. "Audit logs." My heart skipped. The exact records the hospital administration refused to provide. I stared at the flash drive. "You copied them?" She nodded. "Before they could delete everything." For several seconds neither of us spoke. The station noise seemed distant. Muted. "What do the logs show?" Vena hesitated. Then she delivered another twist. Drusilla Karain never edited the records herself. I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Everyone assumes the changes came directly from hospital executives." "And they didn't?" She shook her head. "The edits originated through a private consulting company." I stared at her. A consulting company had access to patient files? They shouldn't have. The statement immediately raised another question. Then how did they gain access? Vena looked uncomfortable. Administrative credentials. My stomach tightened. Someone had used executive level. For several seconds after Vena revealed the existence of the recording, I couldn't speak. Evidence. Real evidence. Not suspicions. Not theories. Not overheard conversations. Evidence. For weeks I had been chasing fragments. Now, for the first time, I was holding something that could expose the truth. I left Central Station and drove home immediately. The flash drive remained in my pocket the entire trip. Twice I checked to make sure it was still there. That was how important it had become. The moment I entered the house, I locked every door and closed every curtain. Then I plugged the drive into my laptop. Several folders appeared. Audit logs. Access records. Internal correspondence. Archived backups. The amount of information was overwhelming. I spent hours reviewing the files. The deeper I dug, the worse everything became. Every altered report generated a digital footprint. Every login attempt left a timestamp. Every modification created a record. And those records pointed toward a pattern. The same group of credentials had been used repeatedly. The same external consulting company appeared over and over again. The same hidden network connected everything. Then I found the recording. The file lasted 23 minutes. My hands trembled as I pressed play. At first the audio sounded ordinary. Board members discussing budgets, expansion plans, investment projections. Nothing unusual. Then a familiar voice entered the conversation. Drusilla Karain. Calm, confident, completely in control. I listened carefully. Several minutes passed. Then I heard the sentence. The exact sentence Vena had described. "We need the matter resolved before Bureau's wife regains credibility." A man asked a question. The audio quality dipped briefly. Then Drusilla responded. "Keep her classified as terminal until the documents are secured." Silence filled my office. I replayed the section. Then again. Then a third time. The words never changed. There was no misunderstanding. No alternative interpretation. She had said it. And now I had proof. The next step became obvious. I contacted federal investigators. Not local authorities. Federal investigators. The scale of the fraud demanded it. Initially they remained cautious. Then I provided copies of the logs, the recording, the altered reports, the audit records, everything. Within 48 hours the response changed dramatically. Investigators requested formal interviews. Digital forensic specialists became involved. Financial crime units joined the case. The situation escalated rapidly. Then another twist emerged. A massive one. The hospital director whose credentials had supposedly been used was interviewed. His reaction shocked everyone. He had no idea the fraudulent activity existed. No idea. Digital experts examined his accounts. Within days they confirmed Vena's claim. His electronic authorizations had been forged. Repeatedly. 4 years. He wasn't a conspirator. He was another victim. That discovery widened the investigation even further. The conspiracy was larger than anyone originally suspected. Far larger. Additional patient records were reviewed. More irregularities surfaced. Then more. Then even more. Cases began appearing from multiple facilities connected to Drusilla's investment network. False treatment records. Inflated billing. Patients transferred without proper authorization. Insurance claims supported by manipulated documentation. The numbers climbed rapidly. Millions became tens of millions. Tens of millions became even more. Every day seemed to reveal another layer. Another deception. Another victim. And throughout it all, one question remained. Where was Drusilla? The answer arrived unexpectedly. 3 weeks into the investigation, federal agents obtained financial records tied to offshore accounts. That discovery triggered emergency surveillance. Good thing it did. Because Drusilla was preparing to leave the country. According to investigators, she had already begun moving assets. Private transportation had been arranged. Funds had been transferred. The escape plan was underway. But she moved too late. Authorities intercepted her before departure. The news broke nationally within hours. I watched the coverage from my living room. The same woman who once appeared untouchable was now being escorted into federal custody. The image felt surreal. For months she had operated behind layers of influence and power. Now cameras followed her every step. Yet despite everything happening around the investigation, my focus remained on one person. Lysera. Because while the conspiracy was collapsing, she was still fighting for her health. Independent specialists reviewed her treatment plan. Every medication. Every dosage. Every recommendation. The findings were alarming. Several drugs had been administered at levels difficult to justify medically. Others appeared unnecessary. Adjustments began immediately. The changes were gradual, careful, monitored closely. And then something remarkable happened. Lysera started improving. Not overnight. Not dramatically. But undeniably. Her alertness increased. Her speech became clearer. She remained awake longer. The fog that had surrounded her for weeks slowly began lifting. The first time we held a full conversation again, I nearly broke down. We sat together in a rehabilitation facility completely unrelated to Drusilla's network. Sunlight entered through large windows. For the first time in months, Lysera looked present. Truly present. She studied my face carefully. Then smiled faintly. A real smile. Not a forced one. Not a medicated one. A real one. You look exhausted, she said. I laughed despite everything. You have no idea. She squeezed my hand. Then her expression softened. I thought nobody believed me. The words hit harder than anything else. Because they revealed how alone she had felt. How powerless. How frightened. I shook my head. I believe you. She closed her eyes briefly. Relief washed across her face. And in that moment, all the investigations, evidence, and legal battles suddenly felt secondary. Because the person I had nearly lost was finally coming back. Months later, the trial began. The courtroom remained packed. The verdict arrived 9 months after I first overheard the nurses talking outside room 814. 9 months. Sometimes it felt like 9 years. The investigation had transformed every part of my life. My home had become a storage room for documents. My calendar had become filled with meetings, interviews, and legal consultations. My understanding of trust had changed forever. And now, everything came down to a single day. The courtroom was packed. Reporters occupied entire rows. Former employees sat quietly near the back. Victims filled many of the remaining seats. Some had lost money. Others had lost years of their lives. A few had lost family members whose medical histories had been manipulated. Every person in that room wanted answers. Every person wanted accountability. I sat beside Lysera. Seeing her there felt almost unreal. Months earlier doctors claimed she was nearing the end of her life. Now she sat upright beside me. Still recovering. Still rebuilding her strength. But alive. Very much alive. The judge entered. The room fell silent. The jury filed in. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Then the foreperson stood. My heartbeat became impossible to ignore. The verdict was read. Guilty. On every major count. Financial fraud. Conspiracy. Evidence tampering. Medical record manipulation. Multiple additional offenses. One after another. The list seemed endless. Drusilla Karain showed little emotion. At least initially. But as the charges continued, cracks began appearing in the calm image she had maintained throughout the trial. For years she had controlled the narrative. Now she couldn't control anything. The courtroom erupted after the final verdict. Some people cried. Others hugged. Several victims simply sat silently, absorbing what had happened. As for me, I looked toward Lysera. She squeezed my hand. Neither of us needed words. The nightmare was finally ending. Or at least the legal portion of it. The consequences that followed were enormous. Drusilla's company collapsed almost immediately. Investors filed lawsuits. Insurance providers pursued damages. Government agencies launched additional investigations. Former business partners publicly distanced themselves. Executives who once praised her suddenly claimed they barely knew her. The empire she spent years building began disappearing piece by piece. That was the karma she ultimately faced. Not a dramatic act of revenge. Not a mysterious downfall. Something much simpler. The truth. The truth stripped away everything she had hidden behind. Her influence disappeared. Her reputation vanished. Her power evaporated. And she had nobody left to blame except herself. Additional prosecutions followed. Several accomplices accepted plea agreements. Others faced separate trials. The fraudulent network eventually unraveled completely. Investigators estimated that millions of dollars had been recovered. Even more importantly, healthcare systems across several regions implemented reforms based on the findings. Audit procedures changed. Access controls improved. Oversight increased. The damage could never be erased entirely. But future abuse became far more difficult. Months later, life finally started resembling something normal again. Not identical to the life we once had. That version was gone. Too much had happened. Too much had changed. But a new version slowly emerged. A healthier version. A more honest version. One spring morning, nearly a year after the trial ended, Lysera and I visited a small coastal town several hours from the city. The weather was calm. The ocean stretched endlessly beyond the shoreline. Families walked along the boardwalk. Children laughed nearby. Everything felt ordinary. And that was exactly what made it special. For so long our lives had revolved around hospitals, investigations, and courtrooms. Now we were simply two people taking a walk together. At one point we stopped near a railing overlooking the water. Neither of us spoke for a while. The sound of waves filled the silence. Eventually Lysera smiled. "You know something strange?" "What?" "If you hadn't left that room, none of this would have happened." I laughed softly. She was right. The realization stayed with me. The entire chain of events began because I said goodbye and walked away. A simple decision. An ordinary moment. A moment that placed me in a hallway at exactly the right time. Long enough to hear a conversation I was never supposed to hear. Long enough to question a story everyone expected me to accept. Long enough to start pulling on a thread that eventually unraveled an entire criminal operation. People often ask me what the biggest lesson was. The answer surprises them. It wasn't about fraud. It wasn't about corruption. It wasn't even about justice. It was about paying attention. Because lies often survive when nobody questions them. In our case, the truth didn't appear all at once. It emerged piece by piece. A missing report. A suspicious conversation. A nervous whistleblower. A hidden recording. Small clues that eventually formed a complete picture. And because enough people chose courage over silence, the truth won. Vena risked her career. Haven risked his reputation. Investigators followed the evidence wherever it led. And Lysera never stopped fighting, even when nobody seemed willing to listen. Together those actions changed everything. Today, Room 814 still exists. The hospital still operates under new leadership. Patients continue receiving treatment there. Most visitors have no idea what happened. Most never will. But whenever I pass through those hallways, I remember the night everything started. The night I thought I was saying goodbye to my wife forever. The night I walked away believing she was dying. And the night two nurses unknowingly exposed a secret powerful people desperately wanted buried. That conversation saved my wife's life. It exposed a massive fraud scheme. And it proved something I will never forget. The truth can be delayed. It can be hidden. It can be manipulated. But eventually, if enough people refuse to look away, it finds its way into the light. The end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future stories filled with mystery, shocking twists, and unforgettable revelations. Also, let me know in the comments, at what moment did you first suspect that Lysera's diagnosis wasn't what it seemed?